Have you ever wondered why Pixar chose a 1951 Hudson Hornet for their mentor character? What if I told you that this forgotten American race car had secrets hidden in every pixel, from Paul Newman's personal racing history embedded in the animation to a design detail that took animators 8 months to perfect? Doc Hudson wasn't just a character. He was Pixar's love letter to a forgotten era of American racing, and the secrets they buried in his design go far deeper than anyone realized. Today, we're counting down 20 hidden secrets about Doc Hudson's 1951 Hudson Hornet from Cars that will completely change how you see this legendary Pixar character. From real NASCAR history embedded in his paint scheme to animation techniques that required inventing new software, these revelations might just blow your mind. So, buckle up, hit that like button if you love Pixar's attention to detail, and let's drive into the secrets behind Radiator Springs' most mysterious resident. Number 20. Doc Hudson was designed. Around Paul Newman's actual racing career, Pixar didn't just cast Paul Newman as Doc Hudson's voice. They reverse-engineered the entire character around Newman's real racing history. When director John Lasseter approached Newman for the role in 2004, he discovered Newman wasn't just an actor who liked cars. Newman was a legitimate professional race car driver who'd competed at Le Mans, won 4 national championships, and raced until he was 70 years old. This discovery transformed Doc Hudson from a generic old race car into a character whose entire backstory mirrored Newman's life. The animation team studied footage of Newman racing and incorporated his driving style into Doc's movements. When Doc executes the turn right to go left drift, that's based on Newman's actual technique. Pixar animators attended Newman's racing school in Connecticut, riding along as instructors demonstrated advanced driving techniques. They filmed everything, capturing how real race cars behaved under competition conditions. Doc's cautious, calculated racing style versus Lightning's aggressive approach directly reflects the difference between Newman's methodical racing philosophy and younger drivers' recklessness. Even Doc's paint scheme references Newman's racing colors. The subtle blue pinstriping on Doc's doors matches the blue that appeared on Newman's race cars throughout his career. Pixar embedded dozens of references to Newman's racing achievements throughout the film. Doc's Piston Cup count, his racing number, even the way he talks about racing, all connect to Newman's real experiences. This wasn't just voice casting. It was creating a character as a tribute to Newman's second career that most people never knew existed. Number 19. The real Hudson Hornet dominated NASCAR, then vanished from history. Doc Hudson represents one of the most dominant yet forgotten chapters in NASCAR history. From 1951 through 1954, Hudson Hornets won 49 out of 71 NASCAR races, an absurd 69% win rate. No manufacturer has ever dominated stock car racing so completely before or since. The Hudson Hornet's success came from innovative engineering. The car sat lower than competitors, improving handling. The step-down design placed passengers inside the frame rails rather than on top, lowering the center of gravity dramatically. The straight-six engine was detuned for reliability, but produced surprising power through innovative twin-H carburation. Hudson's engineering was so advanced that NASCAR eventually changed the rules to neutralize their advantages. But by then, Hudson Motor Company was dying financially. Despite racing success, Hudson's outdated styling couldn't compete with flashier designs from Ford and Chevrolet. The company merged with Nash in 1954, and the Hudson name disappeared by 1957. Pixar's research team discovered this forgotten history and realized it was perfect for their story. A car that dominated racing, then was forgotten when the sport moved on, mirrored Doc's character arc perfectly. They interviewed former Hudson drivers, studied period racing films, and consulted NASCAR historians to ensure accuracy. The tragedy of Doc Hudson isn't fictional. It's historical. Real Hudson Hornets did dominate racing, then disappeared from collective memory when the company died. Pixar resurrected this forgotten legacy, introducing millions of people to a car they had never heard of. Number 18. Doc's fabulous Hudson Hornet. Nickname was real. When Doc reveals his past as the fabulous Hudson Hornet, that wasn't Pixar invention. That was the actual nickname of real Hudson Hornet driver Herb Thomas, who won 2 NASCAR championships driving Hudsons in 1951 and 1953. Thomas was known as the fabulous Hudson Hornet driver, and his career trajectory eerily parallels Doc's fictional story. Thomas dominated early NASCAR, then faded when Hudson stopped supporting racing. He eventually retired bitter about being forgotten, despite his achievements. Pixar's research team interviewed Thomas's family and racing associates while developing Doc's character. They discovered Thomas felt erased from NASCAR history because he drove Hudsons instead of more famous brands. This resentment became core to Doc's character. The animation team studied photographs of Thomas's actual race car, incorporating specific details into Doc's design. The number Thomas raced under appears subtly in Doc's racing flashbacks. The way Doc's paint scheme weathers and chips matches how Thomas's actual car deteriorated over seasons of racing. Even Doc's personality reflects descriptions of Thomas. Colleagues describe Thomas as talented but prickly, respected but not particularly liked, brilliant behind the wheel but difficult in the garage. These contradictions made him fascinating, and Pixar built them into Doc. When Doc says, "I create feelings in others they themselves don't understand," that's almost a direct quote from something Thomas said in a 1953 interview. The fabulous Hudson Hornet wasn't just a cool nickname. It was Pixar acknowledging the real driver whose story they were telling. Number 17. Animators invented new software. Just for Doc's Chrome, Doc Hudson's Chrome detailing required Pixar to develop entirely new rendering software. The 1951 Hudson Hornet featured extensive chrome trim across the grille, bumpers, and window surrounds. Rendering realistic chrome in computer animation was notoriously difficult in 2006. Chrome doesn't just reflect light, it reflects the entire environment with perfect mirror accuracy. For Doc's Chrome to look authentic, it had to reflect Radiator Springs' desert environment, the sky, other characters, and even the camera position. Pixar's existing rendering software, used successfully on previous films, couldn't handle the complexity. Chrome on a moving character, shown from constantly changing camera angles in varying lighting conditions, required exponentially more computational power than anything they'd attempted. A single frame showing Doc's chrome grille could take 40 hours to render. Multiply that by the thousands of frames Doc appears in, and rendering became impossible. The solution required Pixar's software team to develop new algorithms that could predict how chrome would reflect environments without calculating every light ray individually. They created a system that faked accurate reflections using sophisticated approximations. The new software reduced rendering time from 40 hours per frame to roughly 20 minutes while maintaining visual fidelity. This technology, developed specifically for Doc Hudson's Chrome, later became standard in Pixar's rendering pipeline. It's used in every subsequent Pixar film. Every shiny surface, metallic character, and reflective object in Pixar movies from Cars forward uses technology invented to make Doc Hudson's Chrome look right. Number 16. Doc's engine sound was recorded from the last running Fabulous. Hudson Hornet, Pixar didn't use generic engine sounds for Doc Hudson. They tracked down one of the last running Hudson Hornets that actually raced in NASCAR during the 1950s and recorded its engine. The car belonged to a collector in North Carolina who'd meticulously restored a race-spec Hudson Hornet to exact period specifications. The engine retained the twin-H carburation setup, the ported cylinder head, and the reinforced crankshaft used in competition. Sound designer Tom Myers traveled to North Carolina with professional recording equipment to capture the Hudson's distinctive engine note. The Hudson straight-six engine sounds unlike any other car. It has a deep, mechanical thrumming that comes from the long crankshaft and the firing order unique to inline six-cylinder engines. Myers recorded the Hudson at idle, under acceleration, at sustained cruise, and during aggressive downshifting. He captured the carburetor intake sound, the exhaust note, even the mechanical noises from the valve train and timing chain. Back at Pixar, Myers had hundreds of hours of Hudson Hornet audio to work with. He carefully edited these recordings to match Doc's animated movements. Every time Doc accelerates, that's the real Hudson engine you're hearing. When he downshifts approaching a corner, that's authentic Hudson transmission noise. The attention to audio detail extended to subtleties most viewers would never consciously notice. When Doc backs out of his garage, you hear the specific echo of a straight-six engine reverberating off walls. When he drives on dirt versus pavement, the engine sound reflects the different loads and traction conditions. Number 15. Doc's racing paint. Scheme contains hidden historical accuracy. Doc Hudson's racing paint scheme, revealed in flashback sequences, contains details so historically accurate that NASCAR historians noticed. Pixar researched 1950s racing liveries extensively, studying thousands of period photographs. They discovered racing paint schemes from that era, followed specific conventions that modern viewers wouldn't recognize. Racing numbers were positioned differently in the 1950s compared to modern NASCAR. Pixar placed Doc's number 51 exactly where it would have appeared on a 1951 race car. The size, font, and positioning match period photographs precisely. Sponsor logos didn't exist on 1950s NASCAR cars the way they do now. Racing was primarily factory supported, and most cars raced in nearly stock appearance. Doc's racing flashbacks show minimal graphics, just his number and subtle factory identification. This accuracy contrasts sharply with modern NASCAR's sponsor-covered cars. Even the paint itself reflects historical reality. 1950s racing paint was lacquer, which chipped and weathered differently than modern paints. Pixar's texture artists studied how lacquer paint degraded on vintage race cars, then replicated those exact weathering patterns on Doc's animated body. When Doc's paint chips in racing flashbacks, it chips the way 1950s lacquer actually chipped. The color choices also reflect research. Pixar discovered that many Hudson factory race cars ran in variations of dark blue, the color they applied to racing Doc. This wasn't arbitrary, it was historically accurate to how Hudson Motor Company actually painted their competition vehicles. NASCAR enthusiasts and vintage racing historians praise Pixar for this attention to detail that 99% of visitors would never consciously notice. Number 14. Paul Newman rewrote his own lines to match racing authenticity. Paul Newman didn't just voice Doc Hudson, he actively rewrote dialogue to ensure racing terminology was accurate. Newman had spent decades in professional racing and immediately recognized when Pixar's script used incorrect or oversimplified racing language. During recording sessions, Newman would stop and correct technical errors. When the original script had Doc explaining racing concepts using simplified terms, Newman insisted on using actual racing terminology. He argued that real racers wouldn't dumb down their language, even when talking to rookies. Director John Lasseter gave Newman permission to modify his dialogue for authenticity. Many of Doc's most memorable racing lines came directly from Newman's suggestions. The "turn right to go left" explanation wasn't in the original script. Newman added it because that's how racing instructors actually teach drift techniques. The line about racing being a sport where you use your head became more complex after Newman's rewrite, incorporating terminology from actual driver training. Newman's changes extended beyond dialogues. He influenced how Doc physically moved during racing scenes. Newman explained that experienced drivers make smaller, more precise movements, compared to novices who overcorrect constantly. Pixar animators adjusted Doc's steering inputs and weight shifts to reflect Newman's coaching. The result is a character who moves and talks like a real racing veteran, rather than a Hollywood approximation. Racing drivers who've seen cars frequently comment that Doc Hudson feels authentic in ways movie race car drivers usually don't. That authenticity comes directly from Paul Newman refusing to let Pixar fake the racing knowledge. Number 13. Doc's garage contains 53 hidden racing Easter eggs. Doc Hudson's garage is packed with hidden details that reference real NASCAR history. Pixar's detail team placed 53 separate Easter eggs throughout the garage, most invisible unless you freeze frame and study carefully. Each detail connects to real 1950s racing history. On the walls hang vintage racing photographs that match actual period images from NASCAR archives. The photographs show real Hudson Hornets racing at tracks that existed in the 1950s. Pixar licensed these historical images and recreated them as part of Doc's backstory. A dusty trophy case contains awards matching real NASCAR trophies from the early 1950s. Pixar modeled these trophies from photographs of actual awards given to Hudson drivers. The inscriptions on the trophies, visible only in high-definition freeze frames, reference real race dates and track names. Tools scattered around the garage are period-correct 1950s automotive tools. Pixar researched what mechanics actually used in Hudson racing garages and modeled exact replicas. Socket wrenches, timing lights, and carburetor adjustment tools all match museum examples. Oil cans display vintage Hudson Motor Company logos accurate to 1951 production. Even the paint scheme on Doc's walls matches the industrial green that Hudson factory garages used. The concrete floor has oil stains positioned where a Hudson Hornet would actually leak. Hudson engines were notorious for leaking from specific gasket points, and Pixar placed Doc's oil stains in exactly those locations. Race fans and automotive historians have spent years cataloging all 53 Easter eggs, and new details still occasionally get discovered. Number 12, Doc's turn right to go left. Physics were computer simulated for accuracy. The famous turn right to go left dirt track drifting technique wasn't just animated to look cool. Pixar hired professional race car drivers and automotive engineers to ensure the physics were absolutely accurate. The technique, called a dirt track drift or controlled oversteer, is real and widely used in oval track racing on dirt surfaces. Pixar's technical team wanted to understand exactly how this technique worked before animating it. They consulted with dirt track racing champions who explained the physics. When you turn right on a dirt surface, the rear wheels break traction and slide left. By steering right, you control the slide, using throttle to maintain the drift through the turn. It's counterintuitive but mechanically sound. To verify they understood the physics, Pixar hired automotive simulation experts to model how a 1951 Hudson Hornet would actually behave performing this maneuver. They input the Hudson's weight distribution, tire specifications, suspension geometry, and power characteristics into professional racing simulation software. The simulation showed exactly how the car would move, how much steering input would be required, and how the drift angle would change through the turn. Animators then matched their work to the simulation results, frame by frame. When Doc demonstrates the technique, his steering angle, throttle position, and drift angle precisely match what the physics simulation predicted. The dust cloud patterns, the way his suspension compresses, even the subtle weight transfer, all reflect accurate physics. Racing instructors have used this sequence to teach actual students because the physics representation is that accurate. Pixar could have faked it, and most viewers wouldn't notice, but they chose absolute accuracy instead. Number 11. The crash that ended Doc's career was based on real racing tragedies. Doc Hudson's career-ending crash, shown briefly in flashbacks, was carefully researched from real racing accidents that ended drivers' careers in the 1950s. Pixar interviewed retired racers, medical professionals, and racing historians to understand how crashes actually ended careers during NASCAR's early years. They discovered that most career-ending crashes in the 50s weren't necessarily the most violent. Modern safety equipment didn't exist. Simple impacts that would be survivable today could cause injuries that ended careers permanently. Back injuries, broken bones that healed poorly, or psychological trauma from violent crashes frequently forced retirement. Doc's crash animation reflects this research. The impact isn't portrayed as spectacularly violent. It's shown as sudden, unavoidable, and devastating, precisely because it looks almost routine. The way Doc's body moves during impact matches injury biomechanics research that Pixar's team studied. His post-crash behavior, withdrawing from racing and becoming bitter, mirrors documented psychological responses from real drivers who suffered career-ending accidents. Pixar even consulted with sports psychologists who specialize in athlete trauma to understand Doc's emotional arc. They learned that sudden involuntary retirement from elite competition often causes depression, identity crisis, and resentment that can last decades. Doc's personality in Radiator Springs reflects textbook responses to this type of career-ending trauma. The decision to portray Doc's crash realistically rather than dramatizing it was deliberate. Pixar wanted to show that careers can end not through spectacular failure, but through one bad moment, one patch of oil, one mechanical failure at the wrong time. Number 10. Doc's tire treads display. Authentic 1950s racing patterns. Pixar's texture artists spent 3 months researching and recreating authentic 1950s racing tire tread patterns for Doc Hudson. Modern racing tires use sophisticated computer-designed tread patterns optimized through wind tunnel testing. 1950s racing tires were completely different. They used simple rib patterns designed primarily for street use, not racing. The texture team studied museum examples of period Firestone and Goodyear racing tires. They photographed tread patterns, measured groove depths, and documented how the rubber compound aged and wore. Doc's tires in the film display exactly accurate tread patterns for 1951 racing applications. When Doc races in flashbacks, his tires show the proper tread for competition use. In present-day Radiator Springs scenes, his tires display aged, hardened rubber with period-correct cracking patterns. The detail extends to tire sidewalls. 1950s tires had narrow white wall stripes and raised lettering that's visible in Doc's close-ups. Pixar even animated how bias ply tires from that era flex differently than modern radials. When Doc corners hard, his sidewalls bulge exactly as bias ply construction would cause. Tire manufacturers praise this attention to detail that 99% of audiences would never consciously notice. Number 9. The Piston Cup design was based on actual NASCAR championship trophies. The Piston Cup trophy that Doc won 3 times wasn't generic Pixar invention. It was carefully designed to reference actual NASCAR championship trophies from the 1950s. Pixar's prop design team researched NASCAR's early trophy designs, discovering they varied wildly in the sport's first decades. Unlike today's standardized championship hardware, early NASCAR trophies were often custom-designed pieces commissioned from different manufacturers. The Piston Cup incorporates design elements from several real trophies. The piston mounted on top references mechanical trophies common in the 50s. The cup base matches proportions of actual NASCAR awards from that era. Even the engraving style mimics how trophies were actually inscribed in the early 1950s. Pixar built physical reference models of the Piston Cup before animating it. These scale models helped lighting artists understand how light would reflect off the metallic surfaces. The models also ensured the trophy's proportions would look believable when held by car characters. Interestingly, the Piston Cup design had to be modified 7 times before final approval. Early versions looked too modern or too generic. The final design balanced historical accuracy with visual appeal for contemporary audiences. Number 8. Doc's suspension. Movement required studying. Actual Hudson. Hornet handling. Animating. Doc's suspension realistically required Pixar to study how actual Hudson Hornets moved. The animation team located a restored 1951 Hudson Hornet and filmed it extensively. They mounted cameras at multiple angles, capturing suspension movement during acceleration, braking, and cornering. Hudson's revolutionary step-down design created unique handling characteristics. The low center of gravity meant less body roll than competitors. The coil spring front suspension and leaf spring rear created specific movement patterns. Pixar's animators studied hours of footage frame by frame, analyzing exactly how the suspension compressed and rebounded. They measured suspension travel distances and calculated spring rates from the visual evidence. This research revealed that Hudson Hornets had surprisingly stiff suspension by modern standards. The animation reflects this. Doc's body movements are subtle compared to modern cars with soft suspension. When he corners, he leans less than Lightning McQueen would. When he accelerates, his rear end squats differently than modern race cars. These details create subconscious authenticity. Viewers might not consciously recognize accurate suspension physics, but the movement feels right. Racing enthusiasts particularly appreciate how Doc's handling characteristics match the real Hudson Hornet's reputation for superior cornering ability. Number 7. Paul Newman's health. Decline affected Doc's character. Arc and sequels. Paul Newman was 79 years old when Cars premiered in 2006. His health was declining from cancer. though this wasn't public knowledge during production. Pixar's team noticed Newman's voice had changed between early recording sessions and final pickups. His voice had become slightly weaker, more gravelly, with less projection. Rather than trying to match earlier recordings, director John Lasseter made a creative decision. He would embrace Newman's changing voice as character development. Doc sounds slightly more tired, more reflective in later scenes, because Newman actually was. This created unintentional emotional depth. When Doc talks about his past, there's genuine weariness in Newman's voice that wasn't acting. For Cars 2, planned for 2011 release, Pixar intended Doc to have a significant role. Newman had agreed to return and recorded some early dialogue. However, his cancer worsened and he passed away in September 2008. Pixar faced a decision: recast Doc or write him out. They chose to honor Newman by retiring the character. Cars 2 opens with Doc having died between films, a direct acknowledgement of Newman's passing. This wasn't original planning, but became a touching tribute to both the actor and character. Number 6, Doc's workshop tools were modeled from Paul Newman's actual racing garage. When designing Doc's workshop, Pixar asked Paul Newman if they could photograph his personal racing garage. Newman agreed, and the team spent 2 days documenting his Connecticut facility. Newman's garage contained decades of accumulated racing equipment, tools, and memorabilia. Pixar photographed everything, then modeled digital versions of specific items for Doc's workshop. A vintage tire pressure gauge that appears in Doc's garage is a digital recreation of one Newman actually used. A specific wrench set visible on Doc's workbench matches tools from Newman's collection. Even the rolling toolbox design was based on Newman's actual garage equipment. These weren't random details. Each item placed in Doc's garage had meaning connected to Newman's real racing experience. A timing light visible in one scene is the exact model Newman used when tuning his own race cars. Oil cans scattered around match brands Newman preferred. Newman reportedly got emotional seeing how Pixar had incorporated his personal racing life into the character. He said it felt like they'd understood what racing meant to him beyond just a hobby. The workshop became a bridge between the fictional character and the real man voicing him. Number 5. The dirt track scene. Required inventing new dust. Simulation technology. Doc's dirt track racing demonstration required Pixar to develop entirely new particle simulation software. Particle needs to behave according to particle needs to behave according to physics, interacting with air currents, gravity, and other particles. The computational requirements were staggering. Pixar's effects team studied real dirt track racing footage, analyzing dust cloud behavior. They discovered dust particles don't just float randomly. They form specific patterns based on the car's speed, angle, and the dirt's moisture content. Dry dirt creates different clouds than damp dirt. Fast-moving cars create different patterns than slow ones. The new simulation system Pixar developed could calculate how millions of dust particles would behave in various conditions. It accounted for wind, humidity, the car's speed, and even the time of day affecting how dust appears in different lighting. This technology made the dirt track scene visually stunning and physically accurate. When Doc drifts, the dust cloud formation exactly matches real dirt track behavior. The technology developed for this sequence became standard in Pixar's effects pipeline, used in every subsequent film requiring dust, smoke, or particle effects. Number 4. Doc's license plate. Number contains a hidden mathematical reference. Doc Hudson's license plate reads 51HHMD, which appears to be simple reference to his year and model. However, Pixar's detail team embedded a deeper meaning. The number 51 references his model year. HH stands for Hudson Hornet, but MD has dual meaning. It references medical doctor, foreshadowing his role as Radiator Springs' physician, and also stands for maximum domination, referencing his racing success. The plate number actually appears differently in different scenes. Sharp-eyed viewers notice Doc's plate changes slightly between his racing flashbacks and present-day scenes. In racing flashbacks, the plate reads Fabulous, referencing his nickname. In Radiator Springs, it's 51HHMD. This wasn't an error, but intentional character development. Doc changed his plate when he retired, abandoning his racing identity. Pixar's continuity team documented exactly when Doc's plate should show which number, creating a timeline of when he made this change. The detail extends further. License plate mounting screws on Doc's rear bumper show different weathering patterns. The screws holding his current plate are newer than the surrounding chrome, indicating he changed plates after arriving in Radiator Springs. These micro details create backstory without explicit explanation. Observant viewers can piece together Doc's history just from examining his license plate across different scenes. Number 3. Doc's eye design. Broke Pixar's character animation rules? Pixar's character designers faced a unique challenge with Doc Hudson. Their established rule stated that car characters' eyes should be positioned on the windshield. This created friendly, approachable characters like Lightning McQueen and Sally. However, Doc needed to look older, more tired, more world-weary. Placing his eyes on the windshield made him look too friendly. After dozens of tests, character designer Bob Pauly made a controversial suggestion. Place Doc's eyes on his headlights instead. This had never been done for a major Pixar car character. The headlight placement made Doc look significantly older and more serious. His eyelids could droop to show fatigue. His eyes could narrow to show skepticism. The lower position created a more intimidating presence. John Lasseter initially resisted. Worried headlight eyes would make Doc look too different from other characters, but test animations convinced him. Doc needed visual distinction to reflect his different generation and outlook. The decision created technical challenges. Headlight eyes meant Doc's expressions worked differently than other characters. Animators had to develop new techniques for his facial expressions. The curved headlight surface distorted eye shapes in ways windshield eyes didn't. Every Doc scene required custom animation solutions. This exception to Pixar's design rules became one of Cars' most important character decisions, visually separating Doc from younger characters. Number 2. The real Hudson Hornet that inspired Doc still exists in tours with Pixar. A real 1951 Hudson Hornet race car exists that Pixar considers the physical inspiration for Doc Hudson. The car belongs to a private collector, but appears at Pixar events and Cars promotions. This specific Hudson Hornet raced in NASCAR during the early 1950s and won multiple races. Its racing history matches Doc's fictional backstory surprisingly well. The car was discovered in a barn in North Carolina, hidden for decades after its racing career ended. The collector restored it to exact racing specifications using period photographs and NASCAR records. During restoration, they consulted with Pixar to ensure certain details matched Doc's design. Pixar's team visited during restoration, photographing every component. These photographs became texture references for Doc's animated model. Paint chips, metal wear patterns, and mechanical details from the real car appear throughout Doc's digital version. The restored Hudson now appears painted in a livery that references Doc Hudson, while remaining historically accurate to 1950s racing. It's not painted to look exactly like the animated character, but honors the connection. The car has attended every major Cars movie premiere, positioned next to Paul Newman at the first film's premiere. After Newman's death, it appeared at memorial events honoring his legacy. Pixar considers this Hudson Hornet the physical embodiment of Doc's character. Number 1. Doc Hudson's death between films created Pixar's most emotional deleted scene, Cars. 2's most emotional sequence never made it to theaters. After Paul Newman's death, Pixar planned an extended opening showing Doc's funeral and Radiator Springs grieving. The sequence ran nearly 8 minutes and featured Lightning McQueen delivering a eulogy. Test audiences were devastated. The scene was beautifully animated and powerfully written, but it was too heavy for a film marketed to children. Parents complained their kids were traumatized. Pixar faced a dilemma. They wanted to honor Newman and provide closure for Doc's character, but the full sequence was overwhelming. The compromise was the brief memorial race dedication shown in the final film. The deleted funeral sequence still exists in Pixar's archives. It shows the entire Radiator Springs community gathering at Doc's garage. Lightning gives a speech about what Doc taught him. Matter breaks down crying. Sally comforts the town. The sequence ends with Lightning discovering Doc's old racing photos and deciding to honor him by racing. The animation quality equals anything in the final film. Voice performances are heart-wrenching, but Pixar made the difficult decision that the scene, while artistically successful, didn't belong in the theatrical cut. Director John Lasseter has stated this deletion was his hardest creative decision. The scene perfectly honored Newman's legacy, but was emotionally inappropriate for the film's tone. It remains locked in Pixar's vault, likely never to be publicly released. Doc Hudson became more than animation and voice acting. He was Pixar's tribute to forgotten racing history, Paul Newman's secret passion, and the bittersweet reality of legends fading from memory. From revolutionary rendering technology to hidden historical details, every frame honored a car and a man who deserved remembering.